I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, and sometimes I swear I hear footsteps upstairs. The house is too big. The silence here is heavy. It carries memories. It's been almost 3 years since I moved into this house. It used to belong to my grandfather. Now it's mine. And no matter how much I've tried to make it my own, painting walls, changing curtains, moving furniture, I still feel like a guest. The tools lined up in the basement, his chair by the window, everything's the same. Sometimes I think his spirit doesn't watch me with affection, but with reproach, as if asking, "Are you going to let it all fall apart again?" I've lived alone since the trial. People think inheriting a house is a gift. To me, it's a constant reminder that I'm the last link in a broken family. I haven't seen my parents since the courtroom, and that's a relief. But there are nights when I wake up suddenly, convinced I heard their car on the street. It's not groundless paranoia. They've shown up unannounced before, and that's what started everything. I grew up in a cramped house on the outskirts of Scranton. My father wore the same sweaty cap every day, one that said All-Stars. He used to say he could have played professional baseball if I hadn't messed up the plan. I was little, but I understood what that meant. I was the mistake. My mother didn't say much, only spoke when she had to justify her absence. When she came home from work, she brought her exhaustion with her. The neighbor next door, Mrs. Campbell, was the one who taught me how to tie my shoes. She also gave me the first birthday cake I ever had. My parents had forgotten the date. She laughed easily, and when I slept over, she left the TV on low so I wouldn't feel the weight of silence. Maybe that's why I learned to sleep with some kind of background noise, the news, anything. Her living room couch was my bedroom. At home, I remember one specific night. I wanted to watch a cartoon, but my father wanted to see the game. When I complained, he turned off the TV, took the remote, and walked out of the room. I stayed there, sitting, staring at the black screen. That was the first time I understood that loneliness could exist even when someone else was in the house. When my sister was born, everything got worse. I was 5 and still believed my parents were supposed to love me. But when she arrived, my room became hers, and I was sent to the couch. The excuse was that a boy and a girl shouldn't share the same room. On weekends, when my father wasn't working, the tension got worse. He'd sit in the old armchair, crack open a beer, and watch game reruns, his eyes fixed on the screen, and me, invisible, always trying to calculate whether it was safe to walk in front of him to get a glass of water. Sometimes the sound of my footsteps was enough for him to grunt and say, "You always mess everything up, kid." I'd pretend not to hear, but those words echoed in my head for days. One winter in particular is burned into my memory. The cold cut like a knife, and the heating had broken. They slept in the closed bedroom with a portable heater. I slept in the living room with 2 thin blankets. The window let in air cold enough to freeze my fingertips. I remember getting up in the middle of the night to knock on their door. I asked to sleep on the carpet just for that night. My father answered from behind the door, "Go back to your place." I went back, and after that I realized things were worse than I thought. The neighbor was the one who saved me from disappearing completely. She let me help water her plants, taught me how to take care of her cat, Marvin, and told me things like, "You have a good heart. You just need to run away at the right time." I didn't fully understand it, but I memorized that line. The right time came years later, when my parents decided to move without taking me. They said they couldn't afford everyone, and that I'd be better off with the grandparents. I was 12. It was the first time I felt a strange mix of pain and relief. Part of me knew I was being discarded. Another part, silent, secret, knew it might be the best thing that could happen. That last day, I looked at the couch where I'd slept for so many years, the torn foam, the stained fabric, and I promised myself I'd never again sleep in a place that didn't want me. Then I got into my grandfather's car. He didn't say a word. When we arrived at my grandparents' house in Erie, my grandmother greeted me at the door with a coat twice my size. She said that if I wanted to survive, I had to learn to respect the winter. It was the first time I ever had a room of my own, small, with blue curtains and a radio my grandfather had fixed. The basement became my favorite place. The tools hanging neatly, shelves full of screws and cables. My grandfather taught me everything. How to change fuses, fix a radio. He said the world could collapse, but if you knew how to take care of things, nothing would catch you off guard. He didn't talk much, but every gesture carried the weight of a lesson. Over the months, I started going to the local school. The kids in Erie had different accents. They talked about snow like it was nothing. I felt out of place, but little by little, I found my footing. There was a boy named Daniel who lent me a handheld game and invited me to ride bikes after school. He was the first friend I ever had without begging to be accepted. For 6 years, it went on like that. Learning how to live, not just survive. It was a modest life, but a whole one. Then, suddenly, time began to change. My grandmother got sick in the middle of a cruel winter. She coughed a lot, but said it was just the cold. I believed her, because I wanted to believe. My grandfather grew quieter. He'd spend hours on the porch, staring at the yard covered in ice. When she was gone, the silence came back, the same one from Scranton. My grandfather didn't cry in front of anyone. He just put her knitting away in a box and set it on top of the wardrobe. When you really love someone, he said, you don't need to say goodbye. You just keep taking care of what's left. That day, I understood what inheritance meant. My grandmother's funeral took place on a gray afternoon, a small church. My grandfather didn't speak. He sat the whole time, eyes distant. He only stood when the pastor began to talk. His voice trembled as he thanked everyone for coming. After that, he was never the same. I tried to fill the gaps, tending the garden, fixing the gate, doing errands, but nothing helped. 2 years later, he was gone too, sitting in the same chair as always, by the window. He just looked like he was asleep. I found him that way, the newspaper on the floor, his hand still holding his glasses. His funeral was smaller. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because it felt like I shouldn't. My parents were there, and it was the first time I'd seen them in years. My mother still had that look that never really reached me. You've grown, she said. My father said nothing. He just looked me up and down and turned away when he realized I wouldn't lower my head. During the burial, they stayed apart, but I saw them whispering to each other, the kind of whisper that carries calculation. Days later, the family lawyer came, a thin man in a dark suit, looking tired. He sat with me and my parents at the kitchen table, spread out some papers, and calmly said, "Your grandfather left everything to you." Everything meant the house, the land, and the savings he'd built over decades. He explained that the will had been made in advance and was legally in my name. My parents received the news with those smiles people wear when pretending to be surprised, but secretly expected something else. I remember my mother saying, "Oh, but of course he didn't really understand the law." And my father, arms crossed, "We'll settle this among ourselves. No lawyers needed." The lawyer looked him in the eye and said, "Sir, this document represents the deceased's will." My father's face changed in an instant. The same man who once told me to go back to my place now looked completely ungrounded. That's when I realized power had shifted hands, and they didn't know what to do about it. When everyone left, I stayed alone in the kitchen. The house felt different. Not because of the inheritance, but because for the first time, I had something no one could take away. In the days that followed, the messages began. Calls, forced visits. My mother sent texts saying, "The family needs unity." My father's messages were vaguer, things like, "You know, this house belongs to all of us," or "Blood speaks louder than any signed paper." But I wasn't afraid of their voices anymore. That night, I walked through the entire house. I had a promise to keep, to protect what my grandparents built, to make sure no one erased what was left. That's how the distance between me and my parents grew again. But this time, it was my choice. Update 1. My parents had set up a camping tent right in front of the porch, a worn, colorful one. Around it, 2 beach chairs and a small grill. I saw their car parked on the street when I went out to take the trash to the container. It was clear they hadn't left. My father was standing, gesturing with that sharp, cutting voice I knew too well. For a second, I felt the old automatic reaction. To retreat, to apologize, to open the door and say yes. I understood. Then I remembered my grandfather's face and I felt anger rise. My father shouted when he saw me, "This is our house too." The words came out with the certainty of someone who believes he has a right. My mother added, trying to sound affectionate, "Son, let's settle this like a family." Neighbors watched from their porches, some pretending not to see, others lowering their heads. The tent on the lawn was a theatrical claim of ownership, an attempt to assert a right already judged and sealed on paper. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I wanted to record everything, not just the words, but the tone, the air of threat my father thought could still intimidate me. He took 2 steps toward me, almost chest to chest, and said, "This house is ours. It's not fair for us to keep paying rent while you live here. You know how the world is, boy. If you don't help us, we'll stay right here until you change your mind." The difference from the past was that I wasn't the boy returning to the couch anymore. I had the will. I had the lawyer. This house belonged to my grandfather. He left it to me. "You're not coming in." My mother tried to soften things. "It doesn't have to be this way. Think of appearances. Think of family." I rested my palm on the doorknob, not to go inside, but to show I wasn't intimidated. "Listen," my father said, "you'll get tired. We just want what's ours. Open the door and let's talk like civilized people. I didn't move. My grandfather always said, whoever has proof doesn't need to shout. So I let the recorder do its work. When my father's voice rose again, saying that if I didn't open up, they'd camp there until I gave in, I carefully closed the door behind me and called the police. The voice on the other end was patient. I asked for an officer to come and file a report. I simply said there was an illegal occupation on the property by people who had already been ordered to leave. The minutes until the officers arrived felt endless. When they did, there were two of them. One spoke formally. Mr. Anderson, Ms. Anderson, we received a complaint. We'll need you to step off the property and talk with the officer by the car. My father reacted instantly. This is ridiculous. My son's being unreasonable. He looked at me with that mix of anger and fake surprise I knew too well. One officer pulled out a notepad and started writing. He asked for calm when my father raised his voice. He turned to me and said, "Sir, we'll make the report. If there's any threat, we'll record that too." The phrase was direct, almost neutral, but in it there was the promise that someone was watching. They spoke among themselves for a few minutes, checked the property document I kept in a drawer, a copy of the will, and then asked my parents to go to the car to sign a statement. There was resistance. My father argued, accused, talked about rights and betrayal. My mother cried softly, a rehearsed cry meant to win sympathy. As the scene dragged on, I noticed a detail that made me uneasy. Some neighbors watched curiously, others with a hint of scandal. The officers told them to gather their belongings from the lawn and leave. As they crossed the sidewalk, my father looked at me as if delivering a sentence. "You'll pay for this." It wasn't an empty threat. It was the bitter promise of someone defeated who decides to turn resentment into a plan. When their car disappeared down the street, what I felt was a strange mix of relief and a fear more concrete now. Not just the possibility of their return, but the certainty that they knew I was capable of resisting. I spent the next days installing new locks. I called a local store and ordered security cameras that would arrive in 2 days. I also talked to the neighbors, asked them to let me know if they saw my parents' car around. Inside, there was a noisy war going on. I knew I'd done the right thing. It was legitimate. But I also felt a cold, definitive kind of loneliness. I thought about calling the lawyer, asking for restraining orders, but for now, I chose practicality. Record, document, secure. The cameras arrived on a gray morning. The delivery guy looked at me with curiosity, probably wondering why someone needed so many security kits for an old house in Erie. The system had an app, asked for passwords, email confirmations. More patience than I had. That afternoon, the phone rang. On the screen, a name I hadn't seen in years. Emily, my sister. I thought about letting it ring out, but I answered. Her voice was calm. "Hey, I just wanted to know if you're okay." I stopped tightening the screws for a moment. "I'm fine. I saw what happened. Dad told me, you fought again?" I laughed, short, dry. "Fought? They invaded the yard, Emily. They set up a tent like it was a picnic," she said with that moral tone. "You could try forgiving them. They're sorry, you know? They're having a hard time. Hard times don't justify trespassing. You talk like you're always the victim. Life isn't a courtroom. They're still your parents." That line cut through me. "They're still your parents." "So what?" I said. "That doesn't give anyone the right to treat me like an object. You always take things to the extreme. I just wish we could be a normal family." "Normal families don't invade each other's houses, Emily." She went quiet for a while, then said something that sounded more like a goodbye than advice. "One day you'll regret being alone." The call ended, and silence returned. I finished installing the cameras by sunset, one at the gate, another in the garage, 2 along the side corridor, and 1 in the backyard aimed exactly where the tent had been. When I turned the system on, the app showed 4 panels on my phone screen. I watched the trees sway, clouds reflected on windows, the emptiness of the lawn. That night, I got anonymous messages. "Nice prison you've built for yourself." I didn't reply. I blocked the numbers and turned on silent mode. The next few days, I spent hours reviewing footage, as if waiting for the past to appear. No suspicious movement. One night, the side camera caught a car driving slowly by twice within half an hour. I recognized it immediately. The next morning, I woke to a noise, like someone opening the gate. I got up quietly and checked the cameras. It was my father, inspecting the window frames, testing where something might give if he forced it. When he didn't find anything, he left. I sat in the kitchen with the phone in my lap, the video playing, my thoughts fighting each other. One voice said, "You have proof. Go to the police." "Do what you must." Another older voice whispered, "Maybe if you call him, talk to him, it'll all stop." It was shocking how that conciliatory voice still lived in the corners of my head. I called the lawyer that same morning, explained everything calmly. He suggested preventive measures, temporary reinforcements, and promised to document it all. For days, I slept with the phone nearby, and there was always the question, had Emily orchestrated it, or was it just my parents' resentment? Each possibility gnawed at me. I did what my grandfather had taught, paid attention to small signs. I reinforced the locks, added padlocks. Anger gave me fuel, fear gave me focus. I started noticing patterns. The days the car appeared were always the same weekdays when my father wasn't working. Then, one random afternoon while reviewing nighttime footage, I saw a shadow, and for a second, I swear the figure looked up toward the roof, as if searching for a route that didn't involve doors. The camera didn't show a face, but it showed intent, and intent was enough. Update 2. I got home later than planned that Friday. Parked the car and, from a distance, noticed something off. The gate half open, the porch light on. I was sure I'd left it off. I entered cautiously, phone in hand. The house was ransacked. Pictures crooked, cabinet doors open. In the hallway, boxes I kept stacked. My grandfather's things, tools, documents, had been moved. Some opened, others kicked. It was a deliberate mess, like someone had searched for something specific, but left everything scattered on purpose to make a point. In the kitchen, drawers open, a broken mug near the sink. On the floor, fresh mud tracks, and a smell of cigarette smoke. No one had smoked inside that house for years. Fear came first, then a hot anger, not at the break-in, but at the audacity. It felt like the house had been violated twice, once by forced entry, and again by the memory of whose hands might have done it. Upstairs, I found the bedroom window unlatched. No glass broken. They'd used the lock. The same lock the cameras had shown being tested weeks earlier by familiar hands. I ran to the office and opened the camera app. The history showed what I already feared. 2 figures entering from the side at 2:37 p.m. A man and a woman. Hat, dark coat, backpack. The image was clear enough. No doubt, it was them. I watched the footage in silence. They moved through the house like people who still believed they owned it. Walked down the hallway, looked at photos, opened doors. My father said something the microphone barely caught. It sounded like a complaint. Then they vanished from view. Faint laughter echoed through the living room feed when their reflection passed a window. Laughing, maybe from nerves, maybe from pleasure. I sat on the floor among the overturned boxes, trying to decide whether to cry, scream, or act. I chose the third. I called the police, asked for a patrol. The dispatcher recognized the address. Same house as the previous incident, right? And said they'd send someone immediately. While waiting, I walked through the house, filming everything with my phone. Every detail mattered. The loose latch, the footprints on the carpet, the open window. 2 officers entered carefully. One asked to see the video. I handed over my phone and we watched together. "Are these your parents?" the younger one asked bluntly. I confirmed. The other took notes, looked around, and said something halfway between professional and human. "This isn't a visit, it's a break-in." They called in backup to take prints, and as the house was photographed, I felt both shame and relief. Shame for being here again, exposing family wreckage to uniformed strangers. Relief because finally the truth didn't depend only on my word. When the police left, the house felt emptier, but also more mine. I stayed in the living room for a long time, staring at the muddy marks and the open boxes. I knew everything would change from that point on. Update 3. The courthouse in Erie wasn't big. At the front, the seal of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the clock showing 9:02, and the judge arranging papers with the calm precision of someone who's seen every kind of domestic tragedy. On the left side, my parents. On the right, me. My mother wore a dark dress, the same one she used at family funerals. My father wore a borrowed suit. They didn't look at me. My lawyer, Mr. Keene, leaned toward me and whispered, "Breathe. Just listen." His voice was steady, carrying the kind of serenity only someone who trusts evidence can have. The judge began by listing the facts. Property invasion, violation of a court order, material damage, documented verbal threats. The footage from the cameras was shown. The room was silent as everyone watched my parents walking down the hall, laughing, opening boxes, rummaging through drawers. I saw my father's face in close-up, the same cold expression of someone who thinks he's above the rules. My mother, on the other hand, looked lost, but not innocent. When the video ended, the judge asked her to testify. "Mrs. Anderson, do you confirm that you entered your son's house on October 3rd? She looked at the floor, then at her attorney. "I just wanted to get a few things." Without permission? The judge asked, voice steady, tone unchanged. My father, when called, was different. He spoke loudly, gesturing, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that I should have handled it within the family. He's hiding behind the law, he said, pointing at me. That house belonged to my father, which means it's our family's house. The judge looked up from the papers. Mr. Anderson, the will legally transfers the property to your son. Were you aware of that? His silence answered before his words could. Then it was my turn. I told only what mattered. The invasions, the recordings, the messages, the camping on the lawn, the fear. I spoke without emotion or exaggeration, just facts. I just want to live in peace in the house that was left to me, I said, and make sure no one crosses that door without being invited again. The judge paused, took a sip of water, and read the sentence aloud. House arrest for 6 months for my father. A restraining order. 300 meters. Compensation for damages and legal costs. My mother received an alternative sentence with the same contact restriction. No one made a sound for several seconds. My mother cried softly, face hidden in her hands. My father stared into nothing. For a moment, what I felt wasn't vengeance. It was mourning. Mourning for something that had never really existed. I left the courthouse holding the papers. On the sidewalk, Mr. Keene lit a cigarette and said, "They'll probably try to reach out again. People like that always do. But now, you've got the law. The law. This shield that once felt too heavy, but now finally fit me." In the days that followed, I began planning the next step, a permanent restraining order. Mr. Keene would handle it. Over time, I noticed I no longer woke expecting the worst. Fear had turned into routine, and then routine into habit, until one day I realized it was simply gone. The house, silent once more, finally seemed to accept my presence.